we can begin with the refuge and Buddhist prayer, and maybe read through the that short review of the stages of path. Thank you. Sangye Jedan Zoge Janam La Chanjum Banda Dan Gyasu Chi Dagi Jinzoge Sonangi Drola Penje Sangi Druparajo. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Essence encompassing all the Buddhas, originator of all the holy Dharma, scripture, and realization, principle of all the Aryas intending virtue. In the glorious holy Gurus, I take refuge. Please, Gurus, bless my mind to become Dharma, Dharma to become the path, and the path to be without obstacles. Until I achieve Buddhahood, please bless me to be like youthful Nosang and Bodhisattva, always crying, incorrectly following the virtuous friend with pure thought and action, seeing whatever is done as pure and accomplishing whatever is said and advised. Please bless me to see that this greatly meaningful body with freedoms and richnesses is difficult to find and easily perishes, that action and result are so profound, and that the sufferings of the evil gone transmigratory beings are so difficult to bear. Therefore, please bless me to take refuge from the depths of my heart in the three rare sublime ones, to abandon negative karma and to accomplish virtue according to the Dharma. Independence upon that, even if I achieve the mere higher rebirth of a deva or human, so that means even if I practice all of those meditations that we've looked at so far in this series. So you could expect to be born as a human or as a god. Deva is a god, right? But that's not enough. And he goes on to explain why. I will still have to experience suffering endlessly in samsara because of not having abandoned and being under the control of the disturbing thought obscurations, the mental afflictions mainly, that means. Therefore, please bless me to reflect well upon the way of circling in samsara. So up to there, well, anyway, and to continuously follow day and night, the path of the three types of precious trainings in morality, concentration, and wisdom, the principal method for becoming free from samsara. So really, these few lines here have been, they're about the Four Noble Truths, basically. That as long as you don't abandon the truth of the origin, which we were talking about last week, then you'll have to experience the truth of suffering. And so what we've been doing so far hasn't been enough to get rid of the causes of suffering, and therefore hasn't been enough to completely free us from suffering, from cyclic existence. And so what we need to do is practice a path that will lead to a cessation of that, and that's the path of the three types of precious trainings, as it's called here. As I said, morality, training in morality, higher training in morality, in concentration and wisdom. So that's the part, that's where we are at the moment. Then he goes on to talk about why even that's not enough eventually. Independence upon that, even if I achieve mere liberation, so you will be able to achieve your own personal liberation. Still, since there is no sentient being of the 6 types who has not been my father and mother, please bless me to think I must fulfill their purpose and turn away from the lower happiness of nirvana. Then, please bless me to generate precious bodhicitta by equalizing and exchanging myself with others, and to follow the conduct of the conqueror's sons, the conqueror's children, the 6 paramitas, and so forth. Having trained my mind in the common path in that way, I will not be upset, even if I have to experience the sufferings of samsara for a long time. Personally, it won't be a problem when you have that amount of compassion. If you need to, then you'd be happy to. However, please bless me to look at sentient beings with extraordinary, unbearable compassion. Unbearable compassion means compassion that finds their suffering unbearable. And to enter the quick path of the Vajrayana teachings. Then, please bless me to protect my vows and samaya more than my life, and to quickly accomplish the unified Vajradhara state in one brief lifetime of this degenerate time. May I not give rise to heresy for even a second in regard to the actions of the glorious Guru. May I see whatever actions are done as the stainless actions of a Buddha. With this devotion, may I receive the Guru's blessings in my heart. Magnificent and precious root Guru, please abide on the lotus and moon at my heart. Guide me with your great kindness and grant me the realizations of your holy body, speech, and mind. Determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I hold them most dear at all times. May I become like a wish-granting jewel, fulfilling all the wishes, and like a wish-granting tree, fulfilling all the hopes of transmigratory beings. For the sake of accomplishing the 2 purposes of all sentient beings, without any sense of loss or concern, I give away my body and likewise my enjoyments, such as food and clothing, and even all my virtues accumulated over the 3 times. By abandoning attachment and giving everything away, I will pass beyond sorrow, and my mind will achieve the non-abiding, sorrowless state, the state of omniscience. Since I'll have to give up everything all at once when I die, it's best for me to give it away to sentient beings, because Buddhahood is attained in that way. As I have already given this body, an impure aggregate, to all beings to use for their pleasure, even if they always kill me, criticize me, beat me, and so forth, I will let them do whatever they like. From now on, whether they play games with my body or make it an object of laughter by ridiculing and making fun of it to hurt me, since I have already given this body of mine to sentient beings, why would I resist by protecting it and so forth? I will also use it to do any virtuous action that doesn't harm and benefits others. Whenever any sentient being encounters me, may it never be meaningless for them and always be meaningful. Whenever someone has an angry or devotional thought arise, just by looking at me, may that attitude alone become a cause that always accomplishes all the temporary and ultimate purposes of that being. Whenever others criticize me with their speech, harm me with their bodies, or likewise insult me behind my back, may all of them have the fortune to achieve great enlightenment. May I be a savior for those who lack a savior, a guide for all the beings who enter a road, a boat, a ship, and a bridge for those who want to cross the water. May I be an island for those who seek the safe shore of an island, a light for those who want a light, bedding for those who wish for bedding, and for all beings who desire a servant, may I become a servant of them all. May I be a wish-granting jewel and a wish-fulfilling vase, giving rise to whatever is desired, such as food and clothing. Powerful mantra, accomplishing the actions of pacification, increase, and so forth. Great medicine, curing every sickness. A wish-fulfilling tree, satisfying every need. And a wish-granting cow for all beings. Like the four great elements, the earth and so forth, and like the sky, may I always be a means of living in every way for the innumerable sentient beings. Likewise, may I be a means of living at all times and all ways for the realms of sentient beings, equaling the extent of space until they attain the sorrowless state. As long as space remains, as long as transmigratory beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the suffering of transmigratory beings. Thank you. So in this text that I'm following, if you don't have it already, you might be happy to just keep going without a copy, but it should be, there should be advice on the site giving the link for getting the text, ebook or hard copy. So anyway, so this part of the text, which is all about the Four Truths, Four Noble Truths. So it's called the stages shared with persons of medium capacity, which means that a person of medium capacity is one who is not convinced that just getting a good future life is enough. They recognize that as long as one is still not really in control of one's own mind, there's going to be suffering. And so they want to get free of suffering completely. And that is possible, according to the teaching of Four Truths. That is something which is possible. Of course, that's something that we're looking into. So that's possible according to the teachings of the Buddha. And so, sorry about that. Can you hear that noise in the background? Oh, okay, that's good. A little bit. Okay. Yeah, anyway, so just a moment, I'm going to have to do something. I have to close my door. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. Yes, so anyway, yeah, so that's why. So it's called a stage shared with a person of medium capacity or capabilities. So somebody who is interested in achieving their own personal liberation, but hasn't yet started thinking about all other sentient beings. But all of the practice they want to do, almost all, everything that they practice, all their meditations, we also need if we are, we have already decided, we want to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Everything that they need to do, we also need to do as a foundation practice. And right, so I just wanted to go through one or two things from the text that we've already covered with yeah. So we were looking at the Four Truths in general, the way they fit together, why they're taught in that particular order. And I just wanted to read out one or two quotes that come up in the text. So this is on page 155. There's a quote from the 400 stanzas, which is a text that was composed by Deva. I mean, anyway. Yeah, I don't know exactly when. Anyway, he was a direct student of Nagarjuna, and so I don't know, maybe a couple of thousand years ago. I suppose I should know, but I don't. Anyway, so yeah, Deva. It says child. I think better childish ones, immature, childish ones. If this ocean of suffering has no limits in any respect, why are you who are drowning in it not experiencing fear? Why aren't you afraid? It's an interesting question, actually. So it's like you're in. It's I suppose it's a bit like the house is on fire, and you're just sitting there watching the TV. Don't you think you should be doing something? What it's like, what are you doing? It's a bit like that, So actually, you're in cyclic existence, which is much worse than being in a house on fire. So why are you just sort of like just taking it easy, relaxing, just enjoying yourself? Why are you doing that? So what he's saying anyway. You're drowning. Of course, in the real world, if you were drowning, you'd know you were drowning, I think, right? But here it's like you're drowning, but you just haven't noticed yet. You're drowning in the ocean of cyclic existence. There's lots of ocean analogies in Buddhism for some reason. Maybe the people that Buddha was talking to couldn't swim. Maybe that's what it was. I thought there were some other ones anyway. Oh, yeah, there's a couple. There's a couple of things. Now I remember. So I'm going to have to scroll back a bit. So this is on page 153. Well, so anyway, this is where he talks about the structure of this sort of section of the text. So first of all, is at the bottom of the page. So the actual training in the attitude, what that means is the attitude of like seeing the true nature of cyclic existence, and want to achieve liberation from it, want to be free from it. I mean, actually, if you don't like something, then it's quite natural not to want it. So the main thing really is to think about cyclic existence, to understand cyclic existence, samsara, its true nature, and then naturally you want to achieve liberation from it. Then the measure of its development. So what this means is some sort of explanation of, well, if you've actually developed that attitude, then this is, and you're not quite sure, this is how you can be sure. Or maybe you think you have, but if you think, but if you like, if you really think about it, you'll see that you haven't really. So anyway, it's talking about how whether how you're getting on, kind of thing. Yeah, basically like that. Then eliminating some misconceptions, and then he talks about the nature of the path leading to liberation. So that'll be about the three trainings. And then on page 154, this is something I think is quite useful. Personally, I find quite useful. Anyway, but I'll read it out and maybe explain it a bit. So under the heading, identifying the mind striving for liberation. because the kind of thing that's going to come up is, okay, mind striving for liberation. Liberation from what? What is liberation? So what he says is, liberation is freedom from bondage. So when we say liberation, what we mean is freedom from bondage. But of course, that also raises questions. What is that bondage? So, I mean, it's a very simple, fairly simple idea, isn't it? So you're tied up, whether it's in chains or rope or whatever. So we're talking about being liberated from being tied up. And then he goes on to say, karma and the afflictions, karma, anyway, our own actions, the afflictions, the klesha, the mental afflictions, those are what bind us. And what do they bind us? But he says bind one in, maybe bind one to, but anyways, maybe it depends how you think about it. What they tie us to is cyclic existence. So instead of being like tied to a radiator or something like that, you're tied to cyclic existence. As long as you got the karma mental afflictions, you can't get away from psychic existence. You're tied to it, you're chained to it. That kind of idea. Through the power of these two, in other words, because of those two, what those two make you do is the aggregates are reborn in one of the three realms, it says, but I think this is incorrect. I don't think that I'm not saying anything about Laman Tsongkhapa, of course. Of course, he's right. But I've never heard of. It doesn't make sense to talk about the aggregates being reborn. But maybe here, I'm not sure. I really can't remember if this idea of aggregates has come up before in this series. So I'll just mention a little bit. It's going to come up more and more. It comes up a bit more in this chapter, definitely. And then for sure later on the text comes up quite a bit. So aggregates. The aggregates, Sanskrit word is skanda. I don't know what that means, but in Tibetan it's pumpo. And pumpo, the Tibetan word pumpo, literally means a heap. And sometimes you might even, in some texts, see the expression, the 5 heaps. So here, the 5 aggregates. So it's a similar kind of idea. They're called aggregates because each one of them, so there are 5 aggregates, right? So each one of them is composed of many things. So therefore it's called a heap. Heap is only implies that there's lots of things going on, kind of thing. So like we have the form aggregates, Zugipumbo. It's called a form aggregate because our body is made up of all sorts of parts, right? So we're talking about our own 5 aggregates. So that means our own physical body in that case, really. So our own physical body is made up of all sorts of organs and cells and atoms and all that, right? So similarly with the other ones, it's not just the one thing, it refers to lots of things, umbrella for lots of things. So then you've got the Gijing Ondrapa, the Sijingling, resident teacher for many years and still, main teacher at Sijingling in San Francisco. So he has said many times, and it makes a lot of sense. He said, I've heard him say many times, you can just think in terms of body and mind. If you're not familiar with the 5 aggregates, simple way of thinking about it is our body and mind. Any kind of explanation about the 5 aggregates is kind of an explanation of our body and mind, because of the 5 aggregates, the first one, the form aggregate, that's talking about our body. And then the remaining 4 are all to do with the mind, different aspects of the mind. And I should mention, to help avoiding confusion later, possibly in this text, maybe in other studies you might do, there's your own personal five aggregates, and then there's the general five aggregates. So the general five aggregates, so you'd have the general, like the form aggregate in general, that includes everything physical, all of our bodies, but also, you know, like the floor you're sitting on, the world, it's all included in the form aggregate in general, but it's not all part of your own personal form aggregate. With your own personal form aggregate, it's just your body, your own personal body. Yeah. So that's so then the remaining four. So the remaining four, just briefly, the aggregate of feeling or sensation. I think sometimes we call it sensation, because if you say feeling, then people might think we're talking about emotions, and it's not really talking about emotions. It's talking about the sensation or the experience of pain, of pleasure, then neutral feelings when you're not, you know, you're not particularly experiencing pain or pleasure. So that's the second aggregate. And then the third one, the aggregate of discernment. And this one, there's several terms that different translators use for this. So you've got discernment, recognition, discrimination is often used, but I find that a bit strange, actually. Discrimination, it's not really to do with, it's a bit to do with discriminating, you know, but it's the aspect of the mind, or the ability of the mind to distinguish one thing from another. This is this is that kind of thing. So yeah, so what did I say? Discernment. I wouldn't like to call it recognition. It could be recognition. Yeah, I mean, recognition would also be good. I think recognition. Okay, that's the third one. So obviously, you know, even during one day, let alone during our lifetime, we have many different discernments, many different perceptions of different objects and things. So, therefore, the heap, the skanda, the aggregate of discernment. Okay. So then it's quite normal and quite convenient to skip to the last one before explaining the fourth one. The last one is all of our 6 types of consciousness. You've got 5 sense consciousnesses, and then the mental consciousness, the 5 sense consciousnesses. You've got the the consciousnesses, perceptions mainly, connected with the 5 senses: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. So those 5 each has their own. There's a connection, what do you call it, consciousness associated with each of those. And then obviously, it's, you know, the eye consciousness would be the one that perceives visual objects, shapes, and colors mainly. Some would even say that's all that it can perceive. The recognition, what do you call it? The recognition of a particular combination of colors and shapes being such and such an object, being only the mental consciousness's job, if you like. So anyway, then so the same for the other ones, but not everybody would agree with that. So yeah, the main thing is that if you were to say that you can have a visual perception of a tree, for example, not just the shapes and the colors that are attributes of the tree, but you know, you have a visual perception of a tree, the visual consciousness isn't able to think this is a tree. thinking this is a tree, that would be the mental consciousness. So the mental consciousness, it's the one that, simply speaking, it's the one that does the thinking, conceptualizing. That's the mental consciousness. So that would be the sixth one. So you got those six. Then in the fourth aggregate, you've got all the other different aspects of consciousness that are not included in the other four. So, for example, like on the bad side, if you like, hatred, jealousy, and so on, they'd all be included in there. Then also on the positive side, compassion, loving kindness, wisdom, concentration, mindfulness, they'd all be included in that aggregate. Okay. So then as a human being, you have the aggregates of a human being, the five aggregates of a human being. If you were a dog, then you'd have the five aggregates of a dog. And that's actually quite interesting to think about, because we know that there is more difference between ourselves and animals, for example, than just the appearance. So anyway, somehow it's all to do with the aggregates are different. Because they're different aggregates, therefore there's that difference between us. The difference between us is in terms of the aggregates. So maybe the feelings of pleasure, pain, and neutral feelings is going to be the same. The body is obviously different, and especially when you start thinking not just on a sort of a superficial level, but in terms of the whole nervous system, then I'm sure there's huge differences physically, and that would account for a lot of the differences in terms of the mind, right? And that would be, it would be similar really from human to human also, adults to children, men and women, sort of like the different physical setup that's on one level obvious, on other levels, it's almost like you just can't, who knows kind of thing, until the women have been men, got into a man's body for a while, they're not going to know what it's like, really, are they? Because you can't remember. I mean, I can't remember previous lives, so I don't know what it's like. But we know that there are differences. So anyway, it's quite interesting that. But so feelings of pain, pleasure, and so on. What the objects that give you that feeling of pleasure and pain could be, could also be huge differences. Yeah, and then perception, of course, big differences. Probably, seems like we have research that shows there's big differences between ourselves and other organisms. Anyway, so just by the way. Okay, so then, so yes, so as a human, you have human aggregates. As a man, you have a man's aggregates, a woman's aggregates, and so on. And so why it doesn't make sense to me to say the aggregates are reborn is because normally the way it's described is we go from life to life, leaving one set of aggregates behind and taking a new set of aggregates. So it's not so much the idea of the aggregates being reborn, but the person being reborn. Of course, when we say the person's being reborn, what that comes down to is some kind of subtle level of consciousness, which some people like to think would be the same as or equivalent to the soul, because, according to the Christian view, then, the soul, they talk about departed souls, don't they? As the soul goes on. I don't know if anybody really knows what it is, and I'm sure there's all sorts of philosophical, descriptions and arguments and so on. But anyway, well, it is what goes on. So anyway, the some certain aspect, we would usually say, the subtle level of consciousness goes on, the body is left behind. Along with the body, so many aspects of the mind are also left behind. And that should be obvious in a way, because if you leave this life and you're born as a dog, you're going to have dog perceptions of things, a dog's way of thinking of things. You're not going to have your previous way of thinking of things. So it's almost like, although we normally just say the body is left behind, along with that, so much else is left behind. So much else left behind, so it seems. But anyway, so there is something that goes on, right? And so, the way that we normally would describe it is you're going through this death process where the ability of the body to support the consciousness of this life, the mind of this life, I should say, maybe, gradually breaks down. We talk about like a dissolution of the elements, and gross aspects of mind gradually cease, and the mind becomes more and more subtle until you have all that's left is the clear light mind, the mind of clear light, the most subtle kind of mind or consciousness. And so your breathing has stopped and you're clinically dead already. Clinically dead means, like normally people and doctors would say, oh, the breathing has stopped, this person is dead. There's actually a little bit more to go. So the mind becomes more and more subtle, even though you're not breathing and you've got the clear light, that clear light mind, and you're still alive, actually. At a certain point, maybe they say it's quite normal even for a person of an ordinary person that it can last for a few days. Anyway, so a few days, but it can be much quicker than that. So then that clear light mind is somehow, anyway, the mind starts to become less subtle again. And to cut a long story short, you're born into the intermediate state. And so for a maximum of 49 days, you're, in a sense, and the language they use is looking for a new place and a new body to be born. So when you're born, let's say you're born as a human being again, the language we use is you have taken a new set of aggregates, the aggregates of a human being. You had that kind of like very, I know, subtle body of the intermediate being, going here, there, and everywhere, looking for somewhere that they say looking for somewhere, not like I want to find somewhere nice that I can be born. Not quite like that. It's more like your karma is taking you here, there, and everywhere until there is a place. And in terms of like as being born as a human being, the parents that you have the karma with, something like that. Not so much that you have you're searching like consciously. Okay, so you're born as a human around the people normally say at the time of conception, whether it's actually right then or sometime after, I don't know. But anyway, so then you have taken a new set of aggregates. So those are at the beginning, of course, they would just be like embryo aggregates, wouldn't they? And this is where I start getting confused. There's a zygote and then an embryo, and then there's a blah, 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 something else. I don't know. And then, yeah, anyway, so that gradually develops. But so anyway, your 5 aggregates at the very beginning of this life is a little kind of like, well, they call it zygote, don't they? But anyway, kind of a little bit of a blob, a tiny blob of something. Well, anyway, the fertilized egg, right? Fertilized egg, the little blob. which gradually develops into the baby in the womb. And this is something we're going to be talking about a bit because, yeah, anyway, I don't know exactly at what point the child starts to become conscious. But in the beginning, it's quite spacious in there, I should think. I mean, you're just this microscopic, right? Plenty of room to swim around in. But then after a while, it's like, let me out of here. It's kind of it's a bit kind of claustrophobic in here. So anyway, so then you leave, and then of course you've got that body fully formed, hopefully. So anyway, yeah, so it's not really the aggregates are reborn in one of the three realms. I mean, without trying to retranslate it, what it's talking about is you're, through the power of karma and the mental afflictions, you are born in any of the three realms with a new set of aggregates. Basically, that's what's going on. So when it says three realms, so that's the desire realm, form and formless realm. And the one that we're living in is called the desire realm. So in terms of the three realms, you would be born in one of those three realms. Anyway, three realms. So if you haven't, during this life, if you haven't developed enough concentration, you couldn't be born in any of the other two that are called the upper realms, form and formless realms. And then it says, as one of the 5 or 6 types of beings, such as gods. So what that means is, this is talking about the, sort of classical classification of the different types of sentient beings in cyclic existence into this 6 groupings. So you've got the so anyway, the naraks, hell beings, the hungry ghosts, animals. Those are the 3 suffering realms. Then the 3 more fortunate realms as a human, god, or demigod. That would be 6. When he says 5, that's because sometimes the gods and demigods are counted as one. They're types of gods. Well, we call them demigods. I don't think really there's a Tibetan word that really literally, they don't say demigods. They have a funny expression actually, because so the Tibetan word for god is la, and then the demigods are called lamin, which means non-gods. So what we call demigods are called non-gods. Funny. Then also, okay, so we've got the word deva, which is the Sanskrit word for God, but then also something, another expression which Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to favor was the suras and asuras. I can't remember which is which now, but anyway, one of them is gods, one is the demigods. The ones that we call demigods, I guess the reason why they use that is because they're not as powerful as the gods. That's one of the big problems in their lives. They're not as powerful, lots of jealousy. They have to live with them, side by side with them. But anyway, then in one of the 4 birthplaces, such as the womb, Kinishi. So the 4, okay, so well, anyway, born from the womb, born from an egg. So the ones which are born from an egg are also born from the womb, but there's a particular kind of birth from the womb, right? Yes, it's very different, isn't it? Very strange. So the egg comes out and then gradually, which is fertilized, and then gradually the bird or the tortoise or whatever it is. A tortoise is born from eggs, they are as well, aren't they? Yeah, okay. Anyway, or dragons. Dragons also born from eggs, as we know. right? Yeah. Who believes in dragons? Nobody. Wow. I have a friend, and he's very sure. He's from Ladakh, and when he was a kid, I guess I don't know if he was out with his mother or something like that, up on the hills. I don't know if it was sheep or goats or whatever. But anyway, he saw this creature coming out of the ground, and it shot straight up, as you would expect a dragon to do, right? It shot straight up, and he said he didn't have the presence of mind to turn to anybody to say, "Look." Yeah, so he says he saw one. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, he said that. So anyway, well, anyway, we don't believe in them, of course, even though the King George, not King George, Saint George, killed one, famous for killing dragons, wasn't he? But they don't exist, so who knows? But anyway, so my friend saw one, so who knows? Anyway, so that's then uh, Treasury Gilbert. So anyway, Zuki. This one is lit. People often call something like miraculous birth. Literally, it's literally entrance birth, which to me sort of fits much better because it would be like yeah, it's like the consciousness just goes there and takes on a form, takes on a form. So just sort of like almost like appearing spontaneously. That might be another word that they use, spontaneous birth or something like that. But then there's another one which is birth from moisture. So this is quite interesting because I think it's the expression is a reflection of the fact that when oh, I mean, I'm sure we've all seen like wet, muddy places which are kind of like seething with life. So that's what they're talking about. And maybe we're talking about a culture that didn't understand that there were eggs there that had been laid by, I don't know, flies or whatever kind of insect, and that's where they're coming from. It's not actually just birth, just birth. It's not just a question of being born from the moisture. The moisture had to be there, but actually, there were eggs there as well. Okay, so those are the four: birth from the womb, birth from an egg, uh, entrance birth, or what do I call it? Spontaneous birth, maybe, and then birth in moisture. Okay. So those are the different ways of being born. Really, it says four birthplaces, but it's more to do with like the way that you're born. So this is the meaning of bondage there. So in other words, liberation is freedom from bondage by karma and the mental afflictions to the different sets of five aggregates, 4 or 5 aggregates, which you would take according to, your karma and mental afflictions. Does that work? Does that make sense? So whether you talk about it in terms of being born in in one of the three realms, or as one of the 5 or 6 types of being, or one of the 4 ways of being born, anyway, you're going to have a new set of aggregates, and that's what you're being tied to. And that's why, you know, um, if somebody said, well, really, what is samsara? What is cyclic existence? The main thing is your 5 aggregates, your body and mind. At the moment, we've got the body and mind of a human being. There's the body and mind of a dog, body and mind of a cat, and they're very different. They can be very funny also. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so bondage. And so, yeah, okay, Teresa.
Question I have is, so five aggregates, body and mind, but also what you were talking about, the general aggregates, like the
Yeah.
form around us, is also samsara, yeah?
Well, okay, so I think you could say yes. Certainly it's all, like the world that we live in is also a product of our karma. On the other hand, also you've got pure form, like the pure form of an enlightened being, that would also be included in the five aggregates.
The general five aggregates or the
Yeah, the
general?
general. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I can't see why not. Because generally
okay.
speaking, you see, all conditioned, everything which is conditioned, or some people might sometimes put it, all compounded phenomena, can be categorized into these five. They're included in these five. They've got to be in one or the other of those five.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, anyway, I think that was worthwhile, although I didn't realize I was going to spend so much time talking about that. But that's good. It means we don't need to talk about it later. So, the methods for generating the mind striving for liberation. So then this is just below there. So identifying the mind striving for liberation, then how to generate that mind. And as we're going to see, what it really comes down to is mainly thinking about the suffering nature of cyclic existence. So again, we have a quote from the 400 stanzas by Harideva. So he says, how could one who is not disenchanted here have any respect for peace? It does say kuba, which means respect. So, well, I mean, it's sometimes translated as respect. It's, if you think of it in terms of like having any kind of regard. In other words, when it says peace, what he's talking about, the peace of liberation. So it's equivalent to, liberation. So, in other words, if you don't think that samsara sucks, why would you want liberation from it? If you think it's really nice, if you think samsara, cyclic existence, is really nice, not only would you not want to be liberated from it, you want to stay there. And it's interesting actually, because yes, it's quite interesting. It comes up in the four the three principal paths where it talks about how which bit is it I'm thinking of? Yeah. So it talks about koi punso, the marvels of cyclic existence. Often translated like that, marvels of cyclic existence. In other words, you're in a situation, mainly means this. I mean, you could think that the marvels of cyclic existence must mean like God realms where, you live for millions of years and all sorts of kind of incredible pleasure and so on. And maybe it means that as well. But when you're in a life situation where things are going just right, you feel, I really like this. I've got a nice house in a nice place, I can go for nice walks. I've got, new leaf for my organic vegetables and everything. I got a roof over. Yeah, anyway, it's a nice house, roof over my head. That's the marvels of psychic existence, and you don't want to get away from that, do you? So it's that kind of feeling. This is just so nice. And then if somebody starts talking about liberation and samsara, first of all, it's difficult to feel like there's anything wrong with that. Maybe there isn't. It's something to think about. And also the idea of like liberation from that almost gives you this feeling of like emptiness. It's like empty feeling. Like what kind of life, what kind of existence would that be if you don't have this kind of thing? Well, I mean, I guess the simple answer is when we talk about liberation, nirvana, it means like this, only just much better, much, much better. And not much, much better in a sort of worldly sense. It's not just like having a bigger house, um, loads more money, more cars. It's not that, just you enjoy your life at the moment. I'm not, of course, I'm not saying if maybe not everybody is here, but anyway, I'm sure we've experienced it anyway. It's like it's kind of very nice. If you start thinking about the nature of samsara, you begin to see the flaws of it, and I mean, like at the very least, one day you're going to die and leave it all behind. So it's kind of like the way that Geshe Zopa, I think I've heard him say, the late Gensopa, it's like nirvana means like a pure life. So it's like, I feel it's a bit like, it's like this, but just none of the flaws, none of the defects, where you're enjoying life, but it doesn't turn into suffering in the end. So maybe why they sometimes refer to it as a lasting peace and happiness. I see there's some things come up on the chat. I don't know if that's questions. No, it looks like not. Okay, so yeah. So again, then, so what Aryadeva said all those hundreds of years ago. How could one who is not disenchanted here have any respect for peace? If you if you if you don't feel like this way of existing is problematic, you're not going to want to change it. So that's the whole point, really. So right after that, right at the bottom of page 154, Lama Tsongkhapa says, so what he's going to do is we're going to talk about contemplating the faults of cyclic existence, which means thinking about the truth of suffering. And then number two, contemplating the stages of involvement in cyclic existence, how you get into it, which means looking at the truth of the origin. So that's what he wants to do for a while. Okay, so I think probably should have done this before, but anyway, let's have 2-3 minutes to think about this. Sort of pause a moment and maybe reflect, try to summarize in your own mind what we've been talking about. All right, we go on a bit more. So then going on a bit, there are some things here that we already talked about last week, so don't need to go through it again, talking about why the truth of suffering is taught first instead of the truth of the origin. Then so for the actual meditation on suffering, so this is mentioned at the bottom of page 156. So talking about the suffering of psychic existence, different types of suffering in psychic existence in general, and then talking about the specific, problems, suffering of in the different types of sentient being. So this is where you have the 8 sufferings and the 6 sufferings. In some texts, it talks about 3 and then 8 and 6. Lama Tsongkhapa does talk about the 3, but somehow, anyway, we'll see. 8 sufferings. 8 types of suffering that we experience while we're in psychic existence. He has some general comments first of all about our meditation on these things. And the way it's put in the English, I find a bit puzzling. And also, I know I know what it means. I know what he's saying, but trying to sort of like figure out what it means from the way it's expressed here, I'm not sure. So what this is saying, anyway, what he's saying is, when you sit down to meditate on these things, even though you're not trying to cultivate calm abiding, shamatha, one-pointed concentration at this point, you need to nevertheless some of the strategies that you need for developing calm abiding, you also need here some of the principles. And mainly what he's talking about is to meditate without distraction. So obviously when you're trying to develop concentration, when that's the main thing you're trying to do, of course, that's the whole point, is to avoid distraction. As long as you're distracted, then your meditation isn't going to be one-pointed, right? So here also, you need to be one-pointed. So I'll just, yeah. He does also mention that, if you find it a bit difficult to meditate on everything that he says, then, just try to meditate on the main points. That's okay. So he says, so of the 2 types of meditation, checking meditation, which the translator here calls analytical meditation, that's okay, Qigong, and settling meditation. Some people call it placement. I often use that term myself. I'm trying to remember. There's a term that Thupten Jinpa uses. I think it might be settling meditation. Anyway, so checking meditation, you're looking at your meditation topic and looking at it from different angles, trying to understand whether the truth of it or that kind of thing, trying to understand it. Then when you got some experience, then you would settle your mind on that. So, settling meditation, just stay there without analyzing. I think how I would put it is, just rest your mind in that experience. Stay with that experience. Then after a while, you could probably expect it the experience to sort of fade. And then what you do is you do more checking meditation. And that's sort of like brings back the experience and maybe even deepens the experience. And then again, so you alternate settling the mind in the experience and then analyzing, checking. Okay, so this is a type of the kind of meditation here that we're doing here is actually checking meditation. Nevertheless, you want to cease all agitation, he says. So like distraction of the mind towards objects of attachment is what that's referring to, and so forth. So in fact, allowing you want to stop your mind from wandering to any object other than the object you have chosen to meditate on. And so you'll see focusing the mind on the object of meditation without allowing it to wander off to other objects, whether virtuous, non-virtuous, or unspecified. So whatever it is, as long as it's not the object you're meditating on, then you need to stop your mind from going to it. So let me finish this first. So then there's a quote from the Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, the Bodhisattva entering the Bodhisattva way, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. So it says, reciting austerities and the like, the seer, which refers to the Buddha, taught as meaningless. He said they were meaningless if they're done with a mind distracted elsewhere, even if practiced for a long time. So I don't know if he literally meant like totally pointless, totally meaningless. In other words, if you meditate on something with a mind that's not single pointed, with a mind that's distracted, what he's saying is you're going to get very little out of it, even if you spend a long time meditating on it, compared with meditating with a mind that's focused. So it's important to have the mind really well focused. So yes, Teresa.
Sorry, it takes me. I asked Youngster Rinpoche this question, and I'm just going to try it again. So, I do solitary retreat, land of calm abiding, and uh, Tenzin Choki told me that one time she didn't leave her yard for an entire year, so her mind wouldn't get distracted, right? So then I'm thinking, I like to hike and go to the river, do all these things. But I'm thinking, like, in order to really develop concentration, would it be better for me to not hike and go walk around? I don't know. What's your opinion?
My opinion is you can find out for yourself. Do you find that the hiking helps your meditation or sort of undermines or detracts from it? Because
I
not,
think it helps. I think being outside helps,
yeah,
actually.
well, there you are. And shall I tell you
Okay.
what I think what you might well find is that as time goes by, because of that skillful technique, really, you will want to hike less and less and meditate more and more, but
Uh, uh,
naturally. I
yeah,
think,
yeah, not effort. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you force yourself to stop doing things that seem like they're not like strictly keeping my mind on the object, then I don't think that works. And I know from my own experience, it was quite interesting actually when I was at Nalanda Monastery in the south of France. I used to do quite a lot of cycling, and I quite often go by myself. Even if you go with a friend, quite often, there's a distance between you. And I used to find that my meditations while I was out on my bike were much better than any meditations I did when I was in my room.
Huh.
I don't know exactly why. It might be because of just having less expectations. When you're on the seat, you feel like this should be happening.
Oh,
And
yeah.
when you're on the bike, it's like you're just, I don't know, more relaxed. And so it just comes more naturally. I don't know. Anyway, I did find that. It was quite interesting. You sort of, things occur to you that didn't occur to you before. And you kind of get clarity. Yeah, anyway, so not everybody is the same, and you have to find out for yourself. And I think the main thing is, does it help or not? If it's helping, then why not?
Yeah,
And she told you that she was doing that for a year, right?
for a year, because she said when she would leave, her mind would be drawn, of course, to these other objects.
So that's the thing, you see. Maybe for her at that time, it was the natural thing to do, and it worked for her.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I've never done really long retreat, but I did retreat for a few months at Land of Medicine Buddha up there one year. And my plan was to go for walks every day, but I found right from the very first day that I just didn't feel like it. I had the
Ah,
deck, the before they took the deck down, there was a nice deck. I used to walk up and down there. If it was raining, I'd walk up and down the room next door, and just didn't feel like it. But it did. But I think if I'd been forcing myself not to go for walks because I thought it was distracting or not the right thing to do, you don't really feel like it's wrong, but you feel like it should be wrong, sort of thing. I
totally.
don't think that works. I don't think that works. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So keep going a bit. Hmm. So well, this is I think something to good to look at. Is a quote from a sutra. It says the Sutra of Cultivating Faith in the Mahayana. Mahayana Prasada Prabhavana Sutra. Child of the lineage. This enumeration shows that in this manner, Bodhisattva's faith in the Mahayana and anything that springs from the Mahayana spring from or emerge from, arise from, sort of spring from reflecting correctly about the meaning and the Dharma with a mind that is utterly undistracted. So I don't know what that's supposed to be, this enumeration. So this, I mean, it seems to be referring back to something that he's already been talking about. The main point is that what the Buddha is saying is that if you're going to get anywhere in terms of understanding, understanding through reflecting on the words that the Buddha taught and the meaning of those words, the Dharma, Lama Tsongkhapa says below, is it means the words, and the meaning. The Buddha teaches understanding the words, the meaning of the words, and understanding the words and understanding the meaning of the words, somehow making a distinction. Anyway, that all comes from meditating without distraction. If you don't meditate without distraction, it's makes your meditation very weak, and then it's very difficult to progress. So it seems obvious that even, I mean, of course, if from beginning to end your whole meditation was distraction, then of course you wouldn't expect to get anywhere. And so in the teachings of karma on karma abiding, how to develop karma abiding, it says, like, don't be surprised if at the very beginning what you discover is that most of your meditation is distraction. So the operative word being most of, right? Most of it. Because the little bits in between, so when we're meditating, that's kind of how our meditation goes. You sit down to meditate on something, your mind goes off, you have to bring it back. Just like meditating on the breath, where you're supposed to keep the focus of your attention on the breath, and then if your mind goes off somewhere, then you bring it back. Goes off again, you bring it back. You don't get discouraged. It's just normal. That's how it works. And gradually, the amount of time that your mind is distracted will get less and less. The number of times you get distracted will get less and less, and eventually you're going to be able to, just through the force of practice, you're going to be able to keep your mind more and more focused. Nevertheless, those little glimpses, those little periods where you're not distracted, I mean, that's what builds up your experience, isn't it? If you were to say it was completely meaningless, completely pointless, completely ineffective, then nobody would get anywhere, would they? So somehow I think what he's talking about is something that we understand, which is that the more focused you are, the better your meditation is going to go. And the more distracted you are, then the more the less effective your meditation is going to be. And so one reason for starting a meditation off with mindfulness of the breath is to slow the mind down a bit, so that your mind is in a better state for meditation. You're going to, otherwise, if you haven't done something to bring your mind back from everything that's been going on during the day, or all sorts of other things. I mean, of course, you could be doing your meditation in the morning or in the evening, but anyway, if you don't do something that stops your mind being completely, like disastrous and chaotic and so on, then when you try to meditate, you just can't. You just can't. So, and sometimes actually going for a walk is the solution. Anyway, so the point is here, Lama Tsongkhapa, and with this quote, the Buddha is emphasizing that even when you're doing the checking meditation, try to avoid distraction as much as possible. Avoiding distraction isn't just something you need when you're trying to develop one-pointed concentration. Okay. Yeah, I think we can go on to the suffering of birth. So we've got a little bit of time left. Okay, so, these 8 sufferings, 8 types of suffering. That's interesting. He doesn't list them first. So just scrolling through, you've got the suffering of birth, suffering of aging, suffering of sickness, the suffering of death, the suffering of meeting with unpleasant things, suffering of separation from pleasant things, the things you like, the suffering of seeking what you desire, not getting it. Anyway, so the suffering of not getting what you want. And then the 8th one, in brief, the 5 appropriated aggregates are suffering, and that's in quotation marks because that's actually a quote from the Buddha. In brief, the 5 appropriated aggregates are suffering, in the nature of suffering would probably be a better way to put it. Okay, so the suffering of birth. So, in general, teachings on the Lamrim, then, just go through these 8 to talk a little bit about each one. But here, we're going into things in a bit more depth than we would on a sort of beginner's course. I'm not saying that what we're doing here is really advanced or something, but we are going into things a bit more deeply than we would normally. And so here, Lama Tsongkhapa, actually, I think all 8, anyway, most of them, he talks about all of them with 5 points. So, first of all, he talks about the suffering of birth. So, this word suffering, normally if we say suffering, we think of some unpleasant experience, right? Something unpleasant, like pain. You see the suffering of others, probably for most of us, it means seeing their pain, their hunger, their fear, depression, and so on. So that is mostly what we mean by suffering, isn't it? Suffering. Generally, that's what comes to mind. Suffering, pain, sickness, unhappiness. So here in the Well, starting off with the Buddha, actually, he's making this point that, there's this whole series of things that you call suffering, we call suffering, which means they're things that we don't like and we just naturally want to get rid of them. And you don't have to be a human to have that kind of feeling. Even animals, when they're sick, when they're in pain and so on, when they're being beaten or whatever, all sorts of things that happen to them, they don't like it, they want to stop it, they want to get away from it, they will run away from it if they can, right? So then the Buddha introduces this whole other range of things which we don't normally think of as being, oh, I hate this, I want to get away from this. But he says, if you think about it, this is also really, this is also suffering. Suffering in the sense, this is something you want to get, this is a problem. This is something you want to get away from. This is something you want to get rid of. There's something better than this. You can do better than this, and there's a way to get somewhere better than this, get to a kind of life, a kind of situation which is better than this, which doesn't have these things that you normally think are so nice. Actually, they're fraught with just problems and tied up with problems and bound to problems and always end up with problems. So we still call it suffering. And it seems perverse in the beginning to call, like, I don't know, like delicious food, for example. What are you talking about? Suffering. Delicious food, we all like delicious food. Anyway, that's going to come a bit more later. But the point is, when it says the suffering of birth, if we think of birth, and if you've never heard of these kind of things before, when you think of birth, you think, oh, the miracle of birth and how wonderful and so on. And there's a lot of truth in that. You wouldn't think that it's something which is in nature of suffering. So here, the Buddha and, here, Lama Tsongkhapa is explaining about birth in such a way that, if you really think about what he says, then at the end you start thinking, wow, being in psychic existence, going from life to life, even if I only had to be born as a human being in life after life, that means I'm going to have to be born again and again. And I'm going to have this again and again. And so then you end up thinking, if being, because like His Holiness, the Dalai Lama says, hell realms, craters, we can't see. The gods and demigods, we can't see. Can't see, can't remember. We can see animals and humans. And in fact, His Holiness said, even never mind about animals, just supposing that samsara meant being born again and again and again as a human, then it would be worth trying to break free of that, because being born again and again and again and again and again as a human is really, it really sucks. Okay, so anyway, that's the general idea. And the stuff, I'll just go through this very briefly, then we'll go through a bit more. Well, no, we'll just look at the first one. So birth is suffering because it is painful. So this is the obvious thing, but maybe also not so offering. I don't know. Birth is something, as a human being, think about it. The first thing a baby does is to cry because it's suffering. And then the doctor quite often whacks it on the backside. I'm sure I've seen on TV, holding it upside down, whacking it on the backside. Sheesh, what an introduction to the world. But of course, I mean, I don't think they always do that. It's only when the baby's not crying, because if the baby's not crying, it must mean there's something blocking its um, passages, because the most normal thing to do when you've been born is to cry because you're unhappy. Anyway, I mean, we can all just think about this. It's like I was saying, it starts getting a bit claustrophobic in there, and then we talk about it as a natural thing that the baby will start trying to get out. But actually, if you think about it, maybe the reason that the baby wants to get out is because it is just so claustrophobic. But I don't know. I mean, also maybe it's just a natural thing that certain stages development, then it's just naturally wants to get out. But anyway, how's he going to get out? How's he going to get out of there? There's only one way out, unless there's a cesarean. Yeah. So my mum was telling me. So this is the reason why there's a 4-year gap between me and my older brother. So she used to say, uh, it's because your older brother was so bad. That's what I thought she said. Maybe I misheard, because I always thought, because he's my brother's very naughty. My older brother, very naughty. He was always very naughty. He was always up to no good, not like me. So anyway, yeah, but no, more recently, she sort of she explained what she meant was it was so painful. It was just so painful. She just didn't want to have another child. And so she thought that that was normal. She thought that was normal. I think she was saying the other day, if these days what they would have done is a cesarean, because I think maybe a breech birth or something like that they call that. But anyway, he was kind of awkward right from the beginning. Didn't come out right, so caused a lot of pain. So of course we know pain for the mum. If you watch Call the Midwife, which maybe some of you've seen, even in, I don't watch it, but it's very popular in England. I have watched it. I kind of got fed up because it's just about babies being born, and women screaming. That's what it is. Every episode there's going to be two or three women screaming, followed by babies crying. So that's birth. So actually, it looks like it's not just suffering for the mum; it's also suffering for the baby. Very painful. It's just anyway. It's just well, you can say it's natural, and of course it's natural, but it's just kind of like it's just kind of weird. That the whole thing is kind of really weird. I think baby having to be born like that. I mean, whose idea was that? I, I think maybe God didn't like women, so He made them so that they would suffer when they had a baby. Unbelievable. But anyway, so yeah, anyway, so it's evolution, right? The evolution. But wow, I think maybe laying an egg would be much better, right? I think, I think maybe back to the drawing board. Maybe it's even laying an egg. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. They don't. The chickens don't tend to kind of like scream and that, do they? I mean, I've never kept chickens. I don't know, but I don't think so. I think it's sort of like kind of thing. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, that's the thing. So that's the first thing. Birth is suffering because it's painful. So just looking at the birth of a human being, but also how beings. Then the Hunger goes being born from wombs, being born from eggs. Lots of very strong sensations of pain, and we know for the womb-born ones, uh, born from egg and so on. I don't know, but anyway. So yes. So on that note, yeah. So let's please dedicate. So I thought we would. I think it was good to talk about the aggregates. That took up quite a bit of time. Talking about the aggregates, the 5 aggregates. In other words, talking about body and mind, human body and mind, animal body and mind, and then a little bit about the first of the 8 types of suffering, suffering of birth. So that's how far we got. Okay, so thank you. And maybe we can do the prayers of dedication, please. So dedicating all the positive energy that we've created together this evening, as well as all of the merit and good karma and so on, past, present, future of oneself and others, dedicating all of that. May the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. So if you can scroll down a bit, please, a bit more, yeah. So dedicating for the long life of His Dalai Lama, incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. May you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. So we'll do these 2 verses and then we'll stop there. I fully dedicate all these virtues to be able to train just like the hero Manjushri who knows reality, and just like Samantabhadra as well. Keep going, please. Yeah, this one, these 2. I fully dedicate all my roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by all the gone beyond victorious ones of the 3 times in order to have good conduct. Also dedicating for the swift return of our Guru Lama Zopa Rinpoche without any kind of obstacles. Okay, so thank you. Good night.
I think Venerable Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome.